Now, hyperglycemia is just a scientific word for high blood sugar. So it's when someone experiences hyperglycemia or high blood sugar levels for long periods of time on a consistent basis. Now, there are actually 4 different types of diabetes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Radiant Women. I'm so excited for my next guest. His name is James. He's a diabetes educator, and he works with people to treat or reverse type 2 diabetes. He launched his ebook, The A1C Breakdown, and a coaching program called the A1C Breakdown Program. The program is a blueprint guide that can help someone with type 2 diabetes lower their A1C levels to a healthy or a normal range of below 5.7%. I'm so excited that you are coming on, James, because I think a lot of us are either, they know someone with diabetes, they have diabetes themselves, or pre-diabetes, or gestational diabetes. Like, it's such a big thing in society today, and I think it affects everyone in some way. So thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you very much for having me here, Vanya. I know we are in different time zones right now. So right now, I believe it's 20 past 8 a.m. on your side, and right now it's 20 past 8 p.m. on my side. So thanks for accommodating me. Thanks for, having me here. I'm very excited. I could be on your podcast and to be on this journey with you here, and I know it's tailored for women. So I'm honored to be a guest on your podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. So tell me from beginning, for someone who has no medical background, what is the A1C or level, or what is it?
Okay. So your A1C or an A1C test is a very simple blood test that is used to determine if you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And it's a type of test that measures your blood sugar levels or your blood glucose levels on a 3-month average. Okay. But the thing about it is that for an A1C test, you don't need large amounts or a large blood sample. You can just do a simple finger stick, right? And you can get your results as fast as 10 minutes. Okay. Now, the thing about A1C is usually measured in percentages. Because it measures your blood sugar average for a 3-month period, right? It gives you a more accurate reading of how your blood sugars have been fluctuating for the 3 months. A simple random blood sugar test or a fasting blood glucose test usually gives your blood sugar at the moment, but this gives you a timeline. So that's why it's way more accurate. And A1C tests are usually determined in percentages. So below 5.7% is considered to be healthy. So once you're below 5.7%, you're good. But once you start creeping up to 5.7% to around 6.4%, you're in the pre-diabetic range. And once you're 6.5% and above, you're considered to have type 2 diabetes. That's why it's very important. I always tell people that if you have to focus on one thing when it comes to reversing type 2 diabetes, just focus on your A1C, bringing down your A1C levels to below 5.7. It's as simple as that.
Okay. And I assume this is a test that we can request from our GP, or I know every country is a little bit different, but something we can request from the GP to have it done to check our A1C, because if it is simple as a prick of a finger, I would assume that it would be widely available.
Yeah. So the thing about it, as I said, it's different. So in Trinidad, the Diabetes Association of Trinidad and Tobago, they started to make A1C tests a little more accessible and a little more affordable. They started doing A1C tests using a finger prick. Now, usually you can do a full lab where they actually draw in blood and they'll give you tests. Right? Yeah, you can also do that, but just for accessibility and time, because it can be a bit expensive if you're doing it, like if you're taking large samples of blood. So either way, but it's something that's recommended from your general practitioner. or from your healthcare practitioner, as they say. Okay? So you can either get from the hospital, but if you have to go and get an A1C test, usually you need a recommendation from a healthcare practitioner to go and get it. But if you're affiliated with any sort of association, like a diabetes association, you can find out ways and means that you can get your A1C tested.
Okay. So then in terms of diabetes and pre-diabetes, so tell me and I know that it's obviously something that we hear very often, and it's something, that's kind of that showed up everywhere. And I think, as I said, everyone is affected by diabetes, whether directly or indirectly, but certainly everyone is affected by it. What is it? What actually happens to the body? And why is it so important that we avoid it?
Okay, so that's a great question. So first of all, let me give you a definition of diabetes. Diabetes is a chronic disorder. Chronic just means long term, right? When you're experiencing hyperglycemia. Now, hyperglycemia is just a scientific word for high blood sugar. So it's when someone experiences hyperglycemia or high blood sugar levels for long periods of time on a consistent basis. Now, there are actually 4 different types of diabetes that we are really concerned about. And there's a very stark difference between the 4 of them. Now, the thing about it is that before you can understand what is type 2 diabetes, first of all, you need to know the different types. So let's start with type 1. A lot of people, they have a misconception of it. Now, type 1 diabetes is formerly known as juvenile diabetes, because type 1 diabetes only affects children and adolescents, right? Now, the thing about type 1 diabetes is when your body is unable to produce insulin. Type 1 diabetes is what you call an autoimmune disorder. Is when your immune system attacks the healthy cells of your body. In this case, your immune system attacks your pancreas, right? Your pancreas is the organ that's kind of look like SpongeBob, right? There's an organ, it's a pear-shaped organ that that usually that produces insulin. Insulin is the hormone that brings down your blood sugar levels. Now, the thing, that's why people with type 1 diabetes, they have to inject themselves on a daily basis. Now, type 1 diabetes usually happens to children and adolescents. It hardly happens to people who are adults. Okay? So just remember, type 1 diabetes is when your body is not producing enough insulin, right? Due to an autoimmune disorder. Now, there's gestational diabetes, right? Gestational diabetes is a type of diabetes that usually happens in pregnant women and pregnant women alone. Now, the thing about gestational diabetes is that a lot of women, they don't experience any signs or symptoms of diabetes before that, but during their pregnancy term, especially in the 2nd and 3rd trimester, they all of a sudden get symptoms of diabetes. Now, gestational diabetes, the reason why it happens, now there are theories, but I'll give you the reason why, right? Gestational diabetes usually happens because of hormonal changes, okay? During pregnancy, there are 4 hormones that usually increases. So there's progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, and something called human placental lactogen. Now, because of these 4 hormones, especially as the placenta size increases, these hormones will increase. Yeah. Now, what happens is that these hormones affect your body, affects how it utilizes insulin. Now, remember what I said before, that insulin is the hormone that lowers your blood sugar levels. So this is called the contra-insulin effect, right?
Right.
All right, the contra-insulin effect. So what it does, it makes you insulin resistant, right? So your body is producing insulin, but is unable to utilize its insulin properly. Okay, so it's the because of these 4 hormones, especially the human placental lactogen, because of these 4 hormones, it causes your body not to utilize or use insulin properly, therefore causing the high blood sugar levels. Making sense?
Yes, yeah.
Right, that's good, right? Now there's prediabetes. prediabetes is usually precedes or comes before type 2 diabetes. So you hear a lot of people say things like, well, I just suddenly got type 2 diabetes. No. For you to become diabetic, you have been pre-diabetic for quite some time. Sometimes it may take 5 to 15 years for somebody to be from somebody to become pre-diabetic to type 2 diabetic. Yes. So always remember, pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes are what you call time-dependent phenomenon. It takes time. It's a span of time, years, right, of doing a certain type of behavior. Now, pre-diabetes is when it happens when your blood sugar levels are a bit higher than normal, but not yet high enough to be diagnosed as type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And let's get to the big kahuna now, type 2 diabetes. Now, remember in type 1 diabetes, we were saying that your body's unable to produce insulin. Well, in this instance, your body's actually producing insulin, right? Now, but too much insulin. So what I'm trying to say here is that your body, whether you're producing too little bit of insulin or too much insulin, it's toxic for the body and it will cause high blood sugar levels, right? Now, the root cause of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes and also gestational diabetes is something called insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It is when your body's producing insulin but isn't able to use it properly. So always remember that. Now, there's a misconception when people who are type 2 diabetic, they will sometimes their doctors might put them on insulin, right? The thing about that, a lot of people will say things like, well, I was type 2 diabetic, but I became type 1 diabetic. That's not the case. You're actually a type 2 diabetic who's insulin dependent. It doesn't, just because you're on insulin doesn't make you type 1 diabetic. Okay? Right. You have become insulin dependent, and there are few reasons why a doctor will or a healthcare practitioner will put you on insulin. Reason number one, the medications that you are using are not working for you again. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it's not a matter you fail the medication is failing you. Okay? Now, so you have undergone some sort of hyperglycemic or high blood sugar emergency. So you need to lower your blood sugar levels quick, or else you'll go into a diabetic coma, or you'll experience some sort of, an emergency. So they'll give you insulin to bring down your blood sugar levels. So just remember, type 2 diabetes is when you experience high blood sugar levels for long periods of time because your body is producing too much insulin, which is due to insulin resistance.
Okay, all right. So you were saying that certain type of behavior can cause type 2 or pre-diabetes. What is that behavior?
Okay, great question again. Lifestyle. Pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes are lifestyle driven, and it all has to do with your diet and what you eat on a daily basis. Yeah. Now, they will say things like family history, but I'll give you a little history lesson. Up to the early 1950s and 60s, type 1 diabetes was the most predominant type of diabetes. Fast forward to 2022, type 2 diabetes accounts for 90% of the cases worldwide. So is it our genetics that have changed so much? Is it our family history that has changed so much? What has changed mostly is our diets. We're eating way too much processed foods now. Okay, so that's the major shift that has happened within the past 70 years, right? 60 to 70 years. Our diets have changed immensely. We're eating way more processed foods, way more sugary foods, way more fast food. So that's one of the reasons why people will say things like like ethnicity, but type 2 pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes affects everyone, right? It affects people in Asia, it affects people Caucasian, African, Asian, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? They said that type 2 diabetes, if you're above 40 years, you're at actually it was 60 years when I was studying in university way back, right? Now, and now they're saying it's 45 years now. but there are children as young as 10 years old who have not type 1 but type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, if you want to prevent it, right? I've never heard anybody who is on a healthy diet or practices a healthy lifestyle that has prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. It's the same, right? It all has to do with your dietary habits.
Okay. And so what are those dietary habits? What should we be aiming towards when we are trying to avoid either pre-diabetes or trying to reverse our current diabetes?
Okay. So what you can do first and foremost is limit or avoid processed foods as much as possible. And when I mean processed foods, these are things like breads, pasta, sweets, sugary snacks, salty snacks, sodas, soft drinks, anything that has excessive amount of sugar, anything that's in a pack, those kind of things. Always limit and avoid the amount of sugary and processed foods, first and foremost. Right? Always look when so if you're avoiding a lot of sugary and processed foods, that just means that you have to eat a little more healthier foods, right? So that'll be things like less processed, of course, so like vegetables, high sources of fiber, which would be like things like tubers. Even people give rice such a bad name, but rice is not as bad as you might think, right? Because there are a lot of countries there are a lot of countries that are rice eating countries, or they eat a lot of tubers like sweet potatoes and stuff like that, but yet their incidence of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is very low.
Right.
So what is the determining factor? Countries that eat a lot of gluten or floured products. Right?
Okay.
So that's one. Number two, limit the amount of carb intake. That's another thing. Now in Trinidad and Tobago, we eat a lot of carbs. So we have a tradition called Sunday lunch, where we eat a lot of carbs for lunchtime, right? So we eat things like rice, right? We'll eat potato salad with that rice. Then after we'll eat macaroni au gratin, or we call it macaroni pie, but it's like a pasta casserole. So that's starch, and more starch, right? And then after we'll eat, right, and then we'll eat a peas and bean, Even when we're eating our tubers, things like taro and yuca, which is called cassava here, and sweet potatoes, we'll try to mix all of them in one, right? So managing your carb intake, right? Eating an excessive amount of carbs, or that's one of the major causes that can lead to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So whether it's sweet or starchy, because a lot of people will say things like, well, I don't eat a lot of sweet stuff, so how come I have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes? And I'll give you a story. I knew a guy, he ate a loaf of bread a day. And he didn't understand, yes, a loaf of bread, right? And he didn't understand how come he had type 2 diabetes. Well, I told him, well, because you're eating a loaf of bread a day. And he was so confused because he was like, well, I don't eat a lot of sweet stuff. So what you need to do is control the amount of carbohydrates that you eat on a daily basis, right? Also limit things like, limit trans fats or bad fats, limit foods that are low fat, but loaded with sugar, okay?
Right.
Also, right, that's another thing to because remember, when you remove fat from a food, you have to add something to give it flavor, and 9 out of 10 times it's sugar. So always remember, look for foods that are low in fat, high in sugar. Also avoid food items that have high fructose corn syrup. Now, high fructose corn syrup is a processed type of ingredient that is used in things like sodas, jellies, jams, sweet items, pastries, but even savory items now. And the reason why they use high fructose corn syrup, because it's actually cheaper than sugar, right? And it also, right, exactly. And it also increases the shelf life of the product. So that's why they use high fructose corn syrup. So anything with high fructose corn syrup, remove it, right? So what can you do? Just try to eat as natural as possible. Okay? When you're consuming foods, limit or portion out your carbs. Another thing what I always tell people, make vegetables the star of your plate. Plain and simple, right?
Yeah.
Make vegetables the star of your plate. Once vegetables is the star of your plate, you should be fine. And also, sometimes eating too much protein can also cause it. So what you could do, always put, eating too much protein. Now the thing about protein, it doesn't raise your blood sugars as high as something like a piece of potato, but protein actually contributes to you producing more insulin, right? It increases insulin production. So what you need to do is limit. Now protein is good, you need protein in your body, right? Whether you get it from plant sources or animal sources, but you need to limit the amount or monitor how much protein you eat. Okay? So a little nice ratio that I always like to use, for every portion of carbohydrates that you have, you put double the amount of protein and 3 times the amount of vegetables. 1, 2, 3.
Right. 1, 2, 3. I love that. That's so
1, 2,
good.
3. Very simple, right? It's very simple. So if you have a plate, okay, or you could use the quarter half. But so if you say you have 1 sweet potato, you have a medium-sized sweet potato, you can double the size of the sweet potato. You can double the amount of meat you have. So you can have like a thigh or a piece of breast, whichever way, or a piece of beef, whatever, beef cubes. And 3 times the amount of cooked vegetables on that plate. Trust me, if you go with that, you will never go wrong. That's the simplest thing you can do.
Okay.
Another thing, or people have a misconception, is about fruits. People say, "Oh, as a diabetic, I can't have fruits." You can have fruit. It's just that it's the amount of fruit that you can consume during a day. Number one, do not mix your fruits. Okay? Right. So don't have banana with watermelon. That will spike up your blood sugar. Number 2, don't have fruit with a meal. Always have fruit in a fasted state. Not in a starved state, but in a fasted state, right? So you can have 2 to 3 fruits for the day, but always have it in intervals where you're in a fasted state. Stay away from the processed fruits, of course. So things like fruits in sugary syrup, fruits in sugar, all these things. As a type 2 diabetic or someone with prediabetes, stay away from the dehydrated fruit also, right? But a nice way to incorporate fruit, I believe, is in your vegetable juices. So I know people like the green juice, the green juice era we in and all those things. So, right, exactly.
I'm one of them. I love them.
Right. So the fruit that you have can be a sweetener. Okay. Yeah. So you can have your green juice and you can put one fruit into your smoothie as a sweetener, right? Or you can have fruit as a smoothie. So in Trinidad, we call it a punch, right? We call it a punch, right? But it's actually a smoothie. So you can have fruits in your smoothie, right? But just remember, fruits, you can't consume fruits. You just can't consume too much all at once. So you can't say, well, I'm hungry and you eat like a handful of bananas. That's too much, right? So just remember, as a type 2 diabetic, you always have to practice something called mindful nutrition.
Right.
You can have the foods, right? You can have the foods. You just have to practice mindful nutrition. You can have carbs. You don't have to not delete, but you don't have to restrict yourself from carbs. So you say, well, I have type 2 diabetes, I cannot eat carbs. You can't eat carbs. It's just what type of carbs, right? And your portions of carbohydrates. Okay? So just remember, always keep vegetables the star of your plate.
Wow, okay. Is there any vegetables that, I know you mentioned sort of potato and sweet potato, but apart from those that we shouldn't be eating or we should be avoiding or limiting?
All right. Okay, so so in Trinidad and Tobago, we consider sweet potatoes, all those tubers to be staples and not vegetables. But I know in Australia and different countries, they consider to be starchy vegetables. Okay, so what you need to limit are the starchy vegetables: pumpkin, beets or sweet beets, beetroot, sweet beets, and also carrots. Now, those tend to be a bit on the sweeter side, or they tend to be a bit more on the starchy side, and they will rate your blood sugars a little higher. So you need to limit and avoid. So those are the types of vegetables or staples that will be the quarter of your plate. But green leafy vegetables or low calorie vegetables like eggplant or aubergines, string beans, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, all these other green leafy vegetables, bok choy, spinach, all these green leafy vegetables, you can have an exponential amount of it. Reason being because they are low calorie vegetables, they don't have much sugar in it or much glucose in it, and they won't spike your blood sugars as high. So remember things like carrots, pumpkin, sweet potatoes, and all those things, you need to limit. But the green leafy vegetables that are low calorie, like peppers and, as I said, broccoli, all those other salad vegetables like tomatoes, lettuce, and also things like cauliflower, broccoli, as I said, string beans, aubergines, eggplant, all these other things you can have more because they won't spike your blood sugar as high.
Okay, all right. So as I had gestational diabetes in my pregnancy, and it was just ridiculously hard. I actually couldn't find any type of education that was directed at gestational diabetes apart from you just get it in pregnancy, whether it was internet or a book or a program. So tell me, is there any difference between, and I know it's a difference in terms of that pregnant women get gestational diabetes, where type 2 diabetes is, anyone can get. But is there actually any difference in terms of symptoms or the way it should be treated, or, apart from, who gets it, is there any difference between the two?
Okay, so when it comes to gestational diabetes, other than the fact only pregnant women get it, usually people who are pre-diabetic or pre-diabetic before, or suffer from high blood pressure before, or even like I would like to say, which I say this with a pinch of salt. I say this very I say this with a pinch of salt, family history, which I don't really believe in, but when it comes to treating it, you should treat it like if it's pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, meaning that your approach to your diet is supposed to be the same way, because it's more or less, even though it's a different type of biological pathway, it's a similar end result, meaning that it's insulin resistance that is causing the blood sugar spikes. Right. So if you want to counteract the insulin resistance, then very simple: reduce carb, moderate protein, high amounts of healthy fat. Okay. And once you try to counteract that, now when you're treating gestational diabetes, usually, and I'm asking you, did they give you oral medication or did they give you insulin?
No, it was neither. I just mentioned it with diet, but I know some people who usually either get insulin or
more than likely they will give them insulin. Reason being because of so the first line of defense when it comes to treating, when you're using a pharmacological approach to type 2 diabetes, is metformin. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the first line of defense. But when it comes to treating pregnant women, the best type of treatment is injecting insulin, right? For them, using the medication because of the side effects, right? Not side effects only to the mother, but also for the baby, can cause side effects to the baby. And so some of the things and some of the risks will be something called, if you don't control your blood sugar levels, you might end up with something called a macrosomia, which is an enlarged baby. But I find the best approach, and the best approach that you did, was using your diet to try to control it. So going low carb, right?
Yeah.
Going low carb or reduce carb at least. Some people they will go like on the keto. I find like keto might be a bit extreme, especially for pregnancy.
Hmm.
But I believe going at a reduced carb, right? So you can still have like, or you could like carbohydrate cycling. So some days you go low, some days you go moderate, just to kind of control it now. But going a reduced carb, high fat, and high fat don't mean like you're drinking a bottle of olive oil, right? It just means that your right, your sources of fat are very you have good sources of fat, and fat doesn't necessarily mean oil. You can get healthy fats like omega-3s from things like salmon. You can get from things like flaxseed, hemp seeds. You can get so those are avocados. We call it zabuca in Trinidad, but avocado pears. So those are the type of things you can get your healthy fats from, and also moderating your amount of protein, because you're helping is you and your baby. But reducing your carbs, eating healthy sources of fat, moderate amount of protein will definitely help with gestational diabetes. It's the same approach, you just have to have minor tweaks, but same approach, because it's the same thing as insulin resistance that's causing it, the contra-insulin effect.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, because I know it certainly helps me, and and I know that it will help so many women as well who are going through the same thing, because there is really lack of education about when it comes to gestational diabetes, and it's obviously any diabetes is scary, but I think
It is.
because there's a risk to the baby, it brings on an extra scare factor. And one last question that I had always had when I had my diabetes, and I'm sure so many people have as well, is when you have the diabetes, you get that hunger spike, and you're not
Those
hungry.
hunger pangs.
Yes, because you know that you've just you've eaten a couple of hours ago or something like that. What should we do when we're in that? Or I've had instances where I was up, I'm finished eating a decent portion, but I'm still hungry. So what should
Right.
we do in those instances when we're going through that to satisfy our hunger, but at the same time not, spike up our
Blood sugar levels.
yes.
Okay, that's actually a great question. So I'll just explain to you a little science right here. 3 things that satiates hunger or satisfy hunger are fats, protein, and fiber. Okay? Protein contains something called polypeptide double Y, which helps you to feel satisfied, right? Fats contain something called CCK, which is cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin reduces gastric emptying, but also gives the brain a signal that you are full, right? And fiber helps signal to the brain that it stimulates your stretch receptors in your stomach that gives you that full feeling. So I always tell people that if you can incorporate these 3 things into your meals every time, then you won't feel as hungry. So as opposed to when you're eating a lot of processed carbs or even carbs or not, right? But what can help counteract that hunger is by drinking broths,
Yeah.
right, like bone broths or like vegetable broths in the nighttime. Or not in the nighttime, but can help after when you're going through your hunger pangs by making like a bone broth, right? You can get the protein, the fat, and you can add pieces of celery or whatever green vegetables into your bone broth, and you can drink that. Once you drink that, you're getting all the 3 things that can help stimulate all these hormones to signal to your brain that you're feeling full. Even if you're not into the bone broths, you can have a vegetable broth, because there are a lot of people who don't eat like animal sources. Or you can drink something like a type of tea. Okay,
Yeah.
so like a ginger tea, and you add a little salt to it. You add a touch of coconut oil. But once you drink something that's warm, something that's hot, and a nice broth, that can help. Also, what can help is eating green leafy vegetables too. That's something
Yeah.
that can help a lot. So if you're a salad person, excellent, you can do that. Also, what can help with the hunger pangs too, if you're not into salads, you can have vegetable juices.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetable juices can help with the hunger pangs. For sure, for sure. Green vegetable juices. Yeah. And those are the
Wow.
three things. So broths or soup, right? Broths or
Yeah.
soup, salads, cooked vegetables. Even if you take like let's say you take like a piece of eggplant,
Mm-hmm.
you cut it up, you roast it or you bake it, you have that, right? That shouldn't add too much calories. But the point I'm trying to say, broths, salads, and also vegetable juices. Homemade vegetable juices, like so you have like the green juices. So you have like kale juice or whatever.
Yeah.
That will kill all the hunger pangs. But the warm stuff, the hot broths, for sure.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was so brilliant and helpful. I wish I knew you 4 5 years ago, whatever it was. Uh, but better
Please
late
honor.
than never. I hope this helps so many people the way and it educates them the way I was just educated. And thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about your book and your program. So if people want to know more, and if what they're hearing now resonates with them and they're in that process of, okay, so I just got diagnosed with prediabetes or a while ago, or I have diabetes, or I think that I'm at risk, where can they go to work with you so you can help either reduce or reverse?
Okay. So I have, first of all, you can check me on www dot. So the name of my company is Inspiro Wellness, right? So you can check me on www dot Inspiro Wellness, Inspiro INSPIRO Wellness WELLNESS .info, right? I'll say it again, www.inspirowellness.info.
Mhm.
And you can check out my website. You can purchase the book. My ebook is selling on my website. I also have a coaching program. It's a 3 month coaching program that can help you lower your A1C levels to a healthy and normal range, right? And it all
Right.
depends. If you're interested in the coaching program, you can book a free consultation. I do a free 30-minute consultation. Most of the times it goes over, but I just say 30 minutes. But most times, as I said, it goes over because we get into the conversation, and from there, what I do for that consultation, I ask you certain questions and I give you certain solutions that you can take. Simple solutions because I use very pragmatic, very practical solutions for you to get results. The program, the A1C breakdown program, we don't count calories, right? We don't crash diet. We use methods and we use the principles of healthy, mindful nutrition, right?
Right.
Because I always tell people, and habit formation, because I always tell people it's not about the big changes that you make. It's about
Mhm.
the small, minor detail and the things that you do on a daily basis that adds up to get the results that you want.
Right.
Because you have to understand reversing type 2 diabetes is not a fly by night thing because
Yeah.
it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So if you want to do it naturally, it's going to take time, but most of all, it's going to take effort, right?
Mm.
So my A1C breakdown ebook is a blueprint guide that can help you to lower your A1C levels. And in the book, it's a short book, but in the book it has the A1C breakdown. So all this information that you're getting here on this podcast, you're getting actually in the book. And then after, it has the blueprint guide in the second section, which will give you all the methods, all the techniques that can help you.
Right.
But some people, they might actually need a little more than that. They might actually need the actual guidance, and that's what the coaching is for. Okay, so the 3 month coaching program, it helps you to. It's a step-by-step program, and it's a group coaching program. But I don't take more than 5 to 10 people per catchment. Reason
Right.
being is because there's a lot of even though type 2 diabetes, usually it's diet.
Mhm.
Everybody has different struggles. So I don't want
Right.
my group too big that I can't deal with them personally, you know. But what the group does, it helps push the other group members to do better, right? Yeah, so you know, it's not a competition, it's a form of support, because I realize like when you have support, you have people who are there and you're seeing people who are getting results, it can help you to get results. But I don't want the group too big to the point that, you know, that they get lost in translation, if you understand what I mean. So, you know, so it's a group coaching program, but the only way that that will happen is that we have a few conversations to see if I am the right fit for you. Because sometimes, you know, I believe that, you know, I believe that even though I might have a great program, sometimes I might be the right fit for you. So let's see, you know, so that's what the one-on-one consultation is for. And if you're interested, we can go ahead and speak about it. And it's a 3-month program. Once a week, we will speak, you know, we'll join the call. We'll go on a call and we'll talk with the group, whatever. If you have any issues at the side, I'll try to support you as much as I can. You know, you know, I'm accessible when I can be. You know what I mean? I'm accessible, you know, but I mean, if you understand, I'm seeing that in a professional level, because, you know, sometimes some people, they might want to have a little too much access to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, you know, so, but on a professional basis, I'm accessible to all those, you know, I'm fully supportive, and I'm a coach. Once you try, I'll always be there to support you. If you have questions, I'll answer you, you know, I'll try my best. But so go on your website, check out the website. You can also check out my LinkedIn profile. Just type in James Harper. You see a picture of me smiling, right? And you can check out so that's my main social media platform. Or you can go on Inspiro Wellness on Instagram also. So so I'm fairly active on the on LinkedIn and on Instagram, but more on LinkedIn. But check out the website. And I also, sorry about that. And I also have, you can also download a free PDF. I have a PDF called The 8 Dietary Mistakes That Cause Type 2 Diabetes. It's absolutely free. Just go on the website, go on free resources, click on it, check it out, take a click, download it. It's absolutely free.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, we will link your website and your profiles below so that people can access it quickly when they listen to this. So wherever you're listening, the details are in the description. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your wisdom with us. And I hope to have you on again soon, because that was brilliant. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me, Vanya. It's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure being on this call. Thank you so much. I know the time difference has been a bit of an issue for us, but you know, it was a great experience, and I will love to be on the show again. Love it.
Thank you.